Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the smoky, slightly sticky world of medieval European medicine. Don't worry, you won't need a tetanus shot, but I can't promise you won't be offered a nice warm bowl of boiled spiders. You're in a narrow alley, somewhere in 14th century Bruges. It's drizzling slightly, as usual, and your shoes, well, they're more like leather sacks tied to your feet, or already soaked through. A wooden sign creaks above a crooked doorway, a faded painting of a herb sprig, a skull, and what looks suspiciously like a toad. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, what city are you in, and what time are you watching this? I love hearing from you all across the centuries. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck inside the apothecary's shop. The air hits you like a wall, musty dried lavender, sour vinegar, and something meaty. Bottles of cloudy liquid line the walls. Bundles of herbs dangle from the ceiling like upside-down witches. Behind the counter, a thin man in a wool cap eyes you silently, as if assessing your humor. His hands are stained brown, and his fingernails are, well, they're there. You cough. He nods knowingly, then vanishes into the back. You hear clinking. A kettle whistles. A faint sizzling sound, like something trying to escape. He returns, solemn, holding a chipped clay bowl. Drink this, he says. Inside is a thin grey liquid with something floating in it, long legs. 8 of them, to be precise. Yep, spiders, whole ones. You hesitate. He gestures again. For your lungs. Works every time. You're not sure whether to be comforted or terrified, but in this town, turning down medicine might be seen as inviting misfortune, or worse, heresy. And sir, you sip. It's surprisingly bland. Back then, apothecaries weren't quite doctors, not quite herbalists. They were somewhere between a local wizard and pharmacist. Most of them had little formal training, unless you count watching their uncle boil frogs as an apprenticeship. But they had recipes, hundreds of them, copied in scratchy Latin from older texts, most of which were written by people who had never seen a human lung. You wander deeper into the shop while the spider broth settles uneasily in your stomach. A shelf holds small cloth bundles labeled in faded ink, mouse bones, ox tongue, St. John's tooth. That last one is just a pebble. Historians still debate whether the famous spider soup for asthma remedy ever helped anyone. But versions of it appear in multiple manuscripts from France, England, and even the Iberian Peninsula. The logic: spiders spin webs, webs are light, air moves through them. Therefore, spiders must be good for the lungs. Medieval logic, my friend. It's not always wrong, but it's rarely right. And remember, at this point in time, illness wasn't seen as bacteria or viruses. It was an imbalance of humors: black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. If your lungs were wheezy, clearly your phlegm was winning. Time to add something crunchy to balance it out. Outside, a church bell tolls. Someone sneezes in the street. The apothecary crosses himself instinctively and hands you a sprig of rosemary. For protection, he mumbles. You nod, clutching it in your still shaky hands. This is only the beginning of your healing journey. You've entered a world where illness meets incense, superstition blends with science, and every remedy comes with a side of mystery, and sometimes legs. The next morning, you wake up still alive. That's already a win. Your chest feels slightly less heavy. Or maybe it's just that your body is too confused to feel anything at all. You sit up on the straw mattress in the corner of your rented room above the butcher's shop. There's a faint smell of blood and onions. Very medieval. You think about that bowl of spider soup. Did it help? Did it hurt? You're not sure, but you do know one thing: the apothecary looked like he genuinely believed in it. And in this time, belief is often half the medicine. After a light breakfast of stale bread and goat's milk, you wander back into town. This time, you pass a group of men in long, dark robes, their faces almost entirely hidden under heavy beards. They look important, or possibly just cold. One of them carries a case full of metal tools. Another flips through a handwritten book so large it looks like it could double as a weapon. You realize these are doctors. Real, university-trained physicians. Which is to say, they've read some ancient Greek and Latin, taken a few oaths, and definitely learned how to look very serious at all times. As one of them walks past, you overhear a snippet of conversation. His phlegm exceeds the temper of Saturn, but his complexion betrays a sanguine imbalance. In other words, the patient has too much mucus and is in a bad mood. Clearly, the only solution is checking the doctor's beard. Yes, truly. In many places during the Middle Ages, the length and fullness of a doctor's beard were believed to correlate with their wisdom, and, sometimes, their recommended treatments. A thick, well-kept beard suggested scholarly authority. A thin or patchy one, maybe don't trust his leech placement. This sounds absurd now, but it made a strange kind of sense back then. Beards were symbols of age, masculinity, connection to the divine, and resistance to illness. Some even believed a good beard absorbed bad humors before they could infect the brain. So when you find yourself in front of a doctor with a beard so bushy it seems to have its own personality, you feel hopeful. He listens to your cough, takes your pulse with 2 fingers and a squint, then declares, you need heat and dryness. Heat and dryness, 2 of the 4 classical elements. You're not a fireplace, but sure. He prescribes a warming tonic made of wine, cinnamon, and powdered horn, don't ask from which animal, and recommends that you avoid melancholy thoughts. Oh, and stay away from damp air, rotten fruit, and goats. Especially goats. Before you leave, he hands you a small charm on a leather string. Keep it close to your heart, he says. It repels imbalance. Historians have never agreed on whether these medical charms were more spiritual placebo or an early understanding of psychosomatic response. But here's what we do know, medieval physicians rarely separated body from soul. Healing the body meant soothing the spirit. And if that took a fuzzy amulet and a poetic metaphor about hot bile, so be it. You walk away wearing the charm. The tonic burns a little as it goes down, and the cinnamon gives your breath a certain, festive aggression. But for the first time in days, your cough doesn't echo through your lungs like an empty hall. Maybe it's working, or maybe your faith in the doctor's beard is enough. You've survived the spiders. You've sipped the cinnamon horn wine. What's next? A bath. But hold on, this is the Middle Ages. Bathing is not as simple as turning on a tap and lighting some candles. In fact, it's a deeply complicated ritual full of herbs, steam, superstition, and social danger. You find yourself in a stew bathhouse, a popular type of public bathing place in late medieval cities like Paris, Prague, and Lubeck. From the outside, it looks modest, timber-framed, with a painted sign of 2 naked people politely not looking at each other in a barrel. Inside, it's steamy, noisy, and smells like warm broth, sweat, and rosemary. You pay a small fee to the attendant, who is chewing something suspiciously root-like, and he leads you to a wooden tub. It's been freshly rinsed, he says. You try not to think too hard about what freshly means in this context. The water is hot, really hot. That's a good sign. They believe heat drives out sickness, and besides, cold water is considered risky. Some even think it can open the pores to evil spirits. So into the cauldron you go. The attendant drops in a sachet of dried herbs, sage, thyme, mint, and what smells oddly like mustard. He tells you this is a balancing bath designed to realign your inner elements. If you feel pH legmy, mint will cool you down. If you're melancholy, mustard will heat you up. If you're too cheerful, well, he suggests staying indoors for a few days. Joy is suspicious. As you soak, you realize the bathhouse is more than just a spa. It's a community center, a gossip mill, and sometimes even a doctor's office. There's an old woman whispering remedies to a younger girl in the corner, and a man who swears he cured his gout by bathing in turnip water under a full moon. Is any of this real? Historians argue over how effective medieval baths actually were. Some believe they helped with hygiene and circulation. Others point out that shared tubs and reused towels might have spread more diseases than they prevented. What is clear is that people took their baths seriously, at least before the church started getting suspicious. Yes, you heard that right. By the 16th century, public bathhouses began falling out of favor. Not because they weren't soothing, but because religious authorities feared they encouraged, let's say, too much relaxation. And because the plague often followed in the damp, shared footsteps, they were gradually shut down or rebranded as sinful. But right now, in your steaming little tub, none of that matters. Your lungs feel looser, your muscles sigh, a sprig of thyme floats lazily past your nose. You're almost relaxed enough to forget about the spiders. Almost. The bath attendant returns, holding a rough linen towel and a small pouch of dried juniper berries. For protection, he says, handing it to you like a sacred object. You nod, wrinkled and red from the heat. This medieval wellness retreat might not be perfect, but for the first time, you feel like you're sweating your illness away, one oddly spicy bubble at a time. You step out of the bathhouse feeling like a boiled turnip. Softer, warmer, but still very much uncertain. Your cough has dulled to a background wheeze, and your joints creak less than before. But your mind is spinning with every contradictory bit of advice you've heard. Eat cinnamon, avoid goats, trust the beard, fear joy. You need something simpler, something earthier, so you do what many sick townsfolk do, you visit the local herb woman. Not a doctor, not a priest, not even a midwife. Just a sharp-eyed, eternally busy figure everyone simply calls Marta. You find her behind the old city wall, in a garden that smells like vinegar, damp soil, and crushed flowers. She looks up from a bundle of chamomile and gives you a squint that says, I already know what's wrong with you. You explain your symptoms, cough, fatigue, dreams about falling into cauldrons. Marta nods. She plucks a few leaves of horehound, tucks them into a cloth bag, and then, without asking, sticks a clove of garlic into your mouth. Chew, she says. It's not bad. It's also not good. Your breath now smells like a haunted stew. Marta doesn't waste time on humors or celestial charts. Her remedies are based on centuries of local knowledge: which roots grow best in which soil, which flowers bloom before the first frost, which herbs to avoid when Mercury is in retrograde, even if she doesn't know what Mercury is. You watch her crush dried nettles into powder with the side of a rock. She mutters something that sounds like a prayer but might be a recipe. And here's the fascinating part: many of these women, called wise women, cunning folk, or green witches, depending on the town, were the true health keepers of rural medieval Europe. They knew more about plants and people than most university-trained doctors, but they operated outside the system. That made them both essential and dangerous. The church didn't like them. Some towns tolerated them. Others accused them of causing the very illnesses they cured. Yet when your lungs feel like wet cloth and your dreams are full of moaning cows, Marta is the one people trust. She hands you a warm pouch to tie around your neck. Thyme, honey, fennel seed, she says. Wear it at night. Dream of dry summers. You ask her how much it costs. Marta shrugs. Bring me a candle next time. Or a song. You leave with your garlic breath and your herby necklace, and for the first time in days, your head feels a little clearer. Maybe it's a placebo. Maybe it's just the joy of being listened to. Or maybe it's Marta's presence, firm, quiet, and entirely unimpressed by your whining. Historical records show that many of these women were eventually erased from the official story of medicine. Their knowledge wasn't written down, but passed hand to hand, from garden to kitchen to bedside. And tonight, you are part of that chain. The pouch smells weird, yes. But when you lie down to sleep, it's oddly comforting. Like a summer field pressed into a cotton bag. You breathe in the thyme, and for the first time, you don't cough. You wake up to the sound of bells. Not church bells, those are distant and solemn. These are sharper, faster, and coming closer. You sit up, the herb pouch slipping from your neck, and peek out the wooden shutters. It's the bell ringer of the plague cart, moving slowly through the streets. Now don't panic. This doesn't mean you have the plague. Not yet, probably, but it does mean illness is close by, and with illness comes ritual. You throw on your thickest cloak, still damp from yesterday's bathhouse steam, and step outside. The bell ringer nods grimly. He's followed by two men pushing a cart piled with straw, and something under the straw you'd rather not think about. One of them spits and mutters, "Best burn your boots after this." But instead of running away, like your instincts suggest, you walk in the opposite direction, toward the parish priest. You've heard that he's doing corpse cures. Sounds dramatic, but in medieval Europe, it was common to believe that the dead, especially holy or recently passed individuals, could absorb illness from the living. Some even thought you could place a piece of cloth that had touched a saint's bones onto your chest and it would draw out the bad air. You're not ready for bones just yet. But the priest offers something else, a holy relic-infused broth. It's brown, it's steaming, it smells like something between beef stew and old candle wax. He places a warm hand on your head, mutters a Latin prayer, and gestures for you to drink. You hesitate. He smiles. It's mostly lentils. You sip. It's surprisingly edible. There's a hint of thyme again. Maybe everyone's using the same herb supplier. As you sit, a small crowd forms, mostly elderly, some coughing, one man with a boot wrapped in cabbage leaves. The priest doesn't ask questions. He simply gives each person a spoonful of his mystical soup and a whisper of blessing. Now here's where things get murky. Historians still debate how much these rituals were spiritual comfort and how much they were sincere attempts at healing. Some argue that the placebo effect, being cared for, being touched, being noticed, might have helped more than any herb. Others point out that contaminated holy water and communal spoons could have done the opposite. But let's not ruin the moment. You finish your broth, nod politely, and leave a coin on the barrel where the soup pot rests. The priest thanks you by name. Wait, how did he know your name? Don't ask. You return to your cottage with a full stomach and a heart that feels strangely light. Maybe it's the broth. Maybe it's the quiet dignity of rituals older than reason. Or maybe it's the sheer relief of being among people who, like you, are just trying to make it through this coughing century with a bit of dignity in soup. And garlic breath. Always garlic breath. You've tried baths, herbs, and holy broth. You've chewed enough garlic to keep both illness and polite company at bay. But today is different. Because today, you visit the barber surgeon. He greets you with a bloody apron and a grin that says, "I fix heads and cut beards with the same enthusiasm." His shop smells like iron, smoke, and confidence. Now, before you protest, remember this: in medieval Europe, barbers weren't just for hair. They pulled teeth, set bones, treated wounds, and occasionally drilled holes in your skull to let the demons out. All before lunch. You sit in his creaky chair, which tilts at an angle suspiciously close to horizontal. He ties a stained linen cloth around your neck, possibly to catch hair. Possibly blood. "What's troubling you?" he asks, while sharpening a blade with an unsettling rhythm. You mention your cough, your fever, and the strange tingling in your left arm that may or may not be caused by sleeping on a rock. He nods, thoughtful. "Clearly, your humors are unbalanced," he says. Then he gestures toward a row of glass cups, each one stained with traces of old blood. Here we go. Bloodletting, one of the most popular medical practices of the time, based on the ancient theory that illness was caused by excesses of bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. Cut a vein, release some blood, restore the balance. Simple, and wildly imprecise. The barber surgeon selects your arm, wraps it tightly with a strip of cloth, then pricks a vein with a small blade. A warm trickle runs down your skin and into a shallow bowl. You're told not to look, so of course you do. He hums a tavern tune while you slowly feel both dizzy and oddly floaty. This could be the cure, or just the blood loss. To stop the bleeding, he applies a poultice of moss and wine-soaked linen, then offers you a sip of ale. Medicinal, of course. Here's the strange part, some people did feel better after bloodletting. Not because it cured infections or balanced anything, but because it forced them to rest, hydrate, and, most importantly, be treated like someone worth healing. Of course, too much bloodletting was often worse than the disease itself. Many historians blame it for the death of King Charles II and countless other nobles who bled elegantly into the next world. But today, you survive. Barely. The barber surgeon pats your cheek, hands you a small mirror, and suggests a haircut to balance your energy. You decline. Politely, you step out into the street feeling lighter. Literally. And somewhere deep in your woozy mind, you wonder, maybe next time, you'll just stick with the herb woman. Today, you decide to do what any reasonable medieval person does when all else fails. You visit the astrologer. Yes, the stars. When the herbs don't work, the leeches make you dizzy, and the holy broth just tastes like burnt carrots, it's time to see if Mars is in a bad mood again. You walk through the narrow alleys to the edge of town, where the astrologer lives in a crooked little tower that smells faintly of beeswax and burnt parchment. The door creaks open before you knock. Ah, she says, peering at you over a monocle made of tinted glass. You've been coughing. Saturn's fault, I imagine. You are not sure how to respond to that, so you nod politely and step into a room full of maps of the heavens, cracked globes, and dozens of candles dripping wax like slow tears. The astrologer waves her hand dramatically over a scroll covered in symbols. You were born in the late autumn, yes. Near the time of the feast of Saint Martin. You nod again, unnerved. Then your bile is clearly being overpowered by Venus, she mutters. You're not sure if that's an insult. She asks for your date and time of birth, something you absolutely do not know. So she estimates it by the shape of your eyebrows and the curl of your ear. Now, medical astrology may sound whimsical today, but in medieval Europe, it was taken quite seriously. Doctors, yes, even university-trained ones, consulted star charts before prescribing treatments. Certain body parts were believed to be governed by planets. If you had a sore throat and Mercury was in retrograde, better wait. The astrologer traces a pattern with a stick of chalk on the wooden table, then drops a tiny metal ball into a bowl of water. It spins, wobbles, and settles against the side. Aha, she declares. You must avoid leaks for the next 3 weeks. And bathe only on Thursdays. You nod again. This is the kind of advice you can follow. Then, more gently, she offers you a charm, a small piece of parchment with symbols and your correct planetary sign, written in ink made of crushed berries and duck feather ash. You're told to wear it around your neck, near your skin, so the energies of Jupiter can protect your lungs. You do so immediately. Now, were astrologers right? Historians disagree. Some argue they were intuitive observers, linking weather, illness, and even tides to celestial movements long before science caught up. Others claim it was a well-dressed guessing game, a medieval version of Mercury is in retrograde so I'm skipping work. But for you, standing in this warm tower lit by soft firelight and waxy shadows, it feels oddly comforting. The stars are far, mysterious, and utterly out of your control. But maybe that's the point. You thank the astrologer, give her 2 buttons and a pair, currency is flexible these days, and return home with your new talisman gently warming against your chest. Maybe it's the placebo, maybe it's Venus behaving herself. Either way, you cough less that night. You wake to the sound of bells, soft, rhythmic, and solemn. Today, you are trying something entirely different. Something spiritual. You're visiting the monastery infirmary. Nestled behind tall stone walls and fields of herbs, the monastery is a place of quiet order. Here, monks and nuns tend to both the soul and the body, with a level of calm competence that somehow feels more trustworthy than your barber surgeon's bloody apron. You're led through a stone corridor smelling of beeswax polish and thyme. The infirmary sister, a round-faced woman with calloused hands, gestures to a wooden cot beside a narrow window. She does not ask what ails you. She simply places a warm hand on your forehead and nods once. You need rest. And fennel. It's the most confident diagnosis you've heard all week. Monastic medicine in medieval Europe was surprisingly advanced. Monks were some of the only literate people around, and many kept herbals, books that detailed the uses of plants and roots for every ailment from toothache to melancholy. They cultivated gardens full of sage, rosemary, comfrey, and angelica. Not to mention the occasional experimental potion made from fermented garlic and bad Latin. You're given a mild tea made from valerian root, which tastes like boiled feet and wet hay, but within half an hour, your eyelids are heavy. Here's a curious thing, many monasteries were cleaner, better organized, and more peaceful than most town clinics. Patients weren't rushed, poked, or bled for show. They were allowed to sleep, eat warm gruel, and, crucially, recover. But of course, treatment also came with prayer. You're invited to join Vespers, the evening chant. You sit at the back, wrapped in a borrowed cloak, while voices rise like mist in the candlelight. You don't understand Latin, but the rhythm soothes you more than any elixir has. Some monasteries also believed in spiritual causes for illness, sins, divine testing, demonic interference, gently diagnosed, of course. But the more practical ones just chalked it up to bad weather and worse luck. In the scriptorium, a monk is copying a recipe for cough syrup made from wild cherry bark and honey. He lets you smell the ink, walnut mixed with vinegar, and grins as if this is the real miracle cure. You spend the night in a straw-filled bed, listening to the distant hoot of an owl and the gentle snores of another patient. You feel, not healed, exactly, but held. Scholars still debate how effective monastic medicine truly was. Some praise their herbology, others criticize their lack of surgical knowledge. But most agree on this: the monastery was one of the few places in medieval Europe where care was not a transaction, but a duty. The next morning, you're given a small cloth pouch of dried herbs and a prayer written in neat, looping script. No charge, just a reminder to avoid raw turnips and bad company. You leave with a warm belly and the faintest sense that maybe, not everything in this world is chaos and guesswork. You're feeling a bit better, just enough to take a risk. A real one. Today, you're going to try the traveling healer. She appears every few months, with a donkey cart full of bottles, bones, feathers, and rumors. Some call her a witch. Others call her a wise woman. Everyone agrees, her ointments smell weird, but sometimes they work. You meet her at the edge of the woods, where she's set up a little shelter draped in fabrics and dried herbs. Chickens run freely underfoot. A black cat stares at you like it knows too much. "Show me your tongue," she says, before even greeting you. You do. She squints, then pokes your wrist with something that looks suspiciously like a knitting needle. Your blood is lazy, she decides. We'll fix that. What follows is part ritual, part performance, and part actual herbal care. She brews you a syrup of mallow root, anise, and elderflower, then burns a handful of resin on a plate. The smoke curls in your nose and makes you sneeze. She calls that a good sign. This woman, like many of her kind, is part of a long line of folk healers, people, mostly women, who passed down plant knowledge orally through generations. Their cures were often a mix of practical botany, old pagan customs, and sheer instinct. She asks if your dreams have been strange. You say yes. She nods gravely. She ties a red thread around your finger and murmurs something in a dialect you don't recognize. You don't understand the words, but somehow, it makes you feel like someone's actually paying attention. You sip the syrup. It's sweet and earthy, with a bitter aftertaste. She gives you a small tin of salve, made with goose fat, garlic, and crushed beetles, and tells you to rub it on your chest at night. You are slightly horrified, but also intrigued. Now, let's be honest. Historians have long debated the legitimacy of folk medicine. Some dismiss it as superstition, but others point out that these women often knew more about real medicinal plants than the local barber ever would. And more importantly, they were approachable, affordable, and rarely tried to bleed you with a kitchen knife. The woman sends you off with a firm pat on the back and a warning: don't drink ale for 3 days. You ask why. She shrugs. Just don't. As you walk home through the forest path, the salve tin warm in your pocket, you wonder whether any of this will work. But your breath feels a little easier. Maybe it's the herbs, maybe it's the placebo, or maybe, just maybe, it's the power of being cared for by someone who remembers your name. This morning, you wake to the sound of church bells calling for the blessed water blessing, a ritual you hadn't expected but are now curious to attend. You wander to the village square where the priest stands with a large bowl of water, sprinkled with herbs and holy salt. Villagers line up, each receiving a splash on their hands or forehead. You step forward, and the priest looks at you with a faint smile. "Faith is medicine for the soul," he says, dipping his fingers into the water. The ritual is simple but strangely calming. You feel the cold droplets on your skin, the murmured prayers swirling in the air. It reminds you of a time when people believed illness wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. In medieval Europe, holy water was used not only for blessings but as a protection against disease and evil spirits. People believed it could cleanse the body and mind, purify homes, and ward off bad luck. You notice some villagers carrying small bottles of holy water back home, perhaps for those too sick to come. After the ceremony, an elder tells you about blessed herbs, plants grown specifically to be blessed by the clergy. These herbs were considered more potent and were often used in poultices or teas. The idea that faith and medicine intertwined is not just superstition, it's a reflection of the worldview at the time. Disease wasn't just bacteria or imbalance, it was often punishment or test from a higher power. Historians debate how much such rituals actually helped physical recovery. Some think psychological comfort and community support played a big role. Others argue these ceremonies sometimes delay real medical treatment. For you, standing in the cool morning air, smelling rosemary and thyme mixed with incense, it's hard not to feel a little more hopeful. As you walk away with a small vial of holy water tucked safely into your bag, you consider, maybe healing is as much about the heart as the body. Today, your journey takes you to a bustling medieval market, a place full of colors, smells, and the chatter of traders selling all sorts of remedies and curiosities. You weave through stalls laden with dried herbs, animal parts, strange powders, and tiny bottles filled with mysterious liquids. The market is alive with people seeking cures, from simple headaches to more serious ailments. You stop at a stall where an elderly apothecary carefully mixes a powder called theriac, a famous ancient concoction once believed to cure nearly everything, from snake bites to the plague. Theriac's recipe is a wild cocktail, dozens of ingredients including opium, myrrh, cinnamon, and even viper flesh. It's part medicine, part superstition, and part expensive showmanship. You watch as the apothecary weighs tiny amounts, murmuring instructions in Latin. He tells you this potion was popular across Europe for centuries, often considered a cure-all by kings and commoners alike. Nearby, a vendor sells love potions, made from crushed herbs and honey. You resist the urge to ask if they actually work but can't help but wonder how much of medieval medicine was hope and folklore dressed up as science. Interestingly, these markets were also hubs of information exchange. Travelers brought stories of remedies from distant lands, influencing local practices. Yet, not all medicines were harmless. Some remedies included toxic substances like mercury or lead, which historians now believe caused more harm than good. Still, the lively atmosphere and the hope in people's eyes show that medicine in medieval Europe was as much about community and belief as it was about healing. As you leave the market with a small pouch of dried chamomile, you reflect, sometimes, the cure is simply the comfort of trying something new. Today, you're invited into a noble's private chamber, where the focus is on something quite different, medieval beauty and health rituals. The noblewoman's attendants prepare a bath infused with rose petals, lavender, and a splash of vinegar. You're told that baths like these were believed to cleanse not just the body, but also to restore balance and protect against disease. You watch as she delicately applies a face mask made from crushed almonds and honey, a recipe whispered down from ancient texts. Interestingly, hygiene in medieval Europe was a patchwork of beliefs. Some thought frequent bathing could open the pores to harmful spirits, while others embraced elaborate cleansing rituals to maintain health and beauty. You learn about the use of rosewater, both as perfume and a mild antiseptic, favored especially by the upper classes. However, medical historians note that despite such rituals, many people still suffered from skin diseases caused by poor sanitation, crowded living conditions, and limited understanding of germs. A fascinating tidbit, some believed that cosmetics could hide illness, so a pale face was sometimes a sign of status and health, not sickness. As the noblewoman sips a cup of spiced wine, you wonder how much of these beauty treatments were about appearance, and how much about real health benefits. Scholars debate whether these rituals genuinely improved well-being or were mostly social performances. As you leave the chamber, the scent of lavender and rose lingers, a gentle reminder that self-care is an ancient art, sometimes more comforting than curing. Night falls, and you're invited to spend time with a wise woman who lives on the edge of the village, part healer, part mystic, part local legend. Her cottage is filled with dried herbs hanging from wooden beams, bones carved with runes, and tiny bags of dried flowers tucked in every corner. She hands you a cup of warm tea brewed with valerian root and catnip, said to calm the nerves and ease troubled sleep. Unlike the university-trained physicians in town, she works from intuition, observation, and generations of oral knowledge. Her remedies come from the woods, not the library. She shows you a charm bag, linen-stitched by hand, filled with mugwort, garlic, and bits of quartz, meant to be placed under a sick person's pillow. You're skeptical, but the room feels oddly peaceful, as if her beliefs have power simply because she believes so deeply. Historically, women like her were both respected and feared. Known by names like cunning woman or herb wife, they often treated the poor when no one else would. Yet, their knowledge made them vulnerable. During times of panic, especially plagues or crop failures, some were accused of witchcraft, punished for practicing the very skills people once relied on. You ask about the risk. She shrugs. They only call it witchcraft when it works better than a priest's blessing, she says with a wry smile. Modern scholars now believe these women preserved vast amounts of herbal medical knowledge that otherwise would have vanished. As you thank her and step out into the starry night, the scent of thyme and firewood on your cloak, you realize that wisdom often lives outside the pages of books, and sometimes it smells like chamomile and old wood. As your journey winds to an end, you're invited to sit with a monastic healer in a quiet stone abbey nestled in the hills of southern France. The air is cool and filled with the scent of beeswax, fresh bread, and something leafy, maybe mint or lemon balm. You're handed a warm compress soaked in yarrow tea, said to reduce fevers and help wounds close. In the abbey's small infirmary, you see rows of clay pots, carefully labeled in Latin, salvia, melissa, hyssopus. Herbs are grown in the abbey garden, under the care of monks who see medicine not as a science, but as an act of devotion. You help grind dried rosemary in a mortar while the monk hums a psalm. Every action is slow, deliberate, even meditative. Some treatments are familiar by now, like honey in wine-soaked bandages. Others, like oil infused with St. John's wort, seem mysterious, almost magical. You ask where the monks learned all this. The monk nods toward the back room, where ancient manuscripts sit open beside flickering candles. Many are copies of older Greek or Roman texts, preserved and translated over centuries. Scholars now recognize monasteries as key centers of medical knowledge during Europe's so-called Dark Ages. They didn't just pray, they copied texts, grew medicinal plants, and tended to the sick. And yet, the monk tells you, healing isn't always about knowing the right cure. Sometimes, it's about giving someone a clean bed, a warm broth, and a feeling that they're not alone. You help him carry a bowl of soup to a patient. No grand rituals, just kindness, herbs, and quiet prayer. As the bell chimes for evening prayers, you feel a peace settle over the abbey like a thick wall blanket. The soft clink of pottery, the hush of Latin hymns, and the comfort of simple care, all blend into something healing, in its own quiet way. The fire crackles softly now, and the echoes of monks' chants, bubbling potions, and rustling leaves have all faded into something slower, quieter. You lie back, eyes half closed, and let the warmth of wool, herbs, and gentle voices wrap around you like a memory. Maybe you weren't cured, maybe there were no miracles. But you felt the cool spring water on your fingers, the softness of moss underfoot, and the comfort of someone tending your fever with lavender and care. In the end, perhaps that's what healing really is, being seen, being soothed, being safe. Your journey through medieval medicine wasn't loud or heroic. It was gentle, strange, and full of small kindnesses. Like the hush of a chapel at dusk. Like the way chamomile smells when steeped too long. You're already drifting now, so let yourself go. Let the wind blow through your dream village. Let the candles flicker out one by one. And wherever you are tonight, whether in a modern bed or a stone-walled abbey, I hope you sleep deeply.